Somewhere right now, a teenager is standing on a stage in a cap and gown, holding a diploma while 3,000 people clap for her. She graduated top of her class. She can solve a quadratic equation in under a minute. She can name every organ in the human body, recite the causes of the First World War, and translate a paragraph of Spanish without blinking. She has never filled out a tax form. She doesn't know what an interest rate actually does to a loan over 10 years. She has no idea what a credit score is, why it exists, or how one bad month can follow her for 7 years. In a few months, she'll sign her first lease, apply for her first credit card, and take out her first student loan. And every single one of those decisions will be made blind. If this sounds familiar, it's because it happened to almost everyone watching this. Not because anyone failed her. She didn't fail a single class. The system worked exactly as designed. And that's the part that should stop you. We don't usually think of school as something with a design. We think of it as neutral, as just how you learn things. But every classroom, every bell schedule, every subject on the timetable was chosen by someone for a reason. At some point in history, someone decided calculus was mandatory and money was optional. The question this film is going to sit with is simple, and once you hear it, you won't be able to unhear it. Who made that decision? And what did they actually want you to become? Because the answer isn't nobody thought of it. The answer is a lot stranger than that. To find where this started, you have to go back further than you'd expect. Not to a school board meeting last decade, to Prussia in the early 1800s after Napoleon's army humiliated them on the battlefield. The Prussian leadership looked at their defeat and drew a hard conclusion. They hadn't lost because their soldiers were weaker. They'd lost because their soldiers didn't follow orders fast enough, didn't work together in formation, didn't respond instantly to a command from above. So they built a new kind of school. Rows of desks facing forward, a bell that told you when to start and when to stop. Children grouped by age, not by ability. A single teacher delivering the same information to everyone at the same pace, whether they understood it or not. The goal was never curiosity. The goal was obedience, punctuality, and standardization. Because that's exactly what you need to build reliable soldiers and soon after, reliable factory workers. This wasn't a rumor or a conspiracy theory passed around online. Education historians have documented this Prussian model extensively, and it's one of the most influential blueprints in the history of modern schooling. Here's the part that matters for you and me. That model didn't stay in Prussia. Other industrializing nations looked at it and saw something incredibly useful. A way to take millions of foreign children and turn them into a disciplined workforce that could run machines, show up on time, and follow instructions without asking why. It wasn't built to create owners. It was built to create employees. And once you see that, a lot of your own school memories start making a different kind of sense. America was industrializing fast, and factories needed exactly what Prussia had already figured out how to produce. Workers who could read a manual, follow a schedule, and not cause trouble. Think about your own school day for a second. A bell rings. You move to the next room. You raise your hand before speaking. You sit in rows. You're graded on how well you repeat back what you were told. None of that is an accident of convenience. It's a factory floor, just with textbooks instead of machines. And a factory doesn't need its workers to understand capital, ownership, or interest. It needs them to understand punctuality, compliance, and repetition. This is the moment most people expect a villain to show up. There isn't one. Not really. Nobody sat in a room in 1850 twirling a mustache and saying, "Let's keep the poor poor." It was simpler. And, honestly, more unsettling than that. The people designing mass education were solving for the economy they had. One that needed a huge supply of obedient labor, not a huge supply of small business owners and investors. Financial literacy wasn't hidden from you. It just was never the point of the exercise to begin with. Meanwhile, the small number of families who already own land, businesses, and capital didn't need a school to teach their kids about money. They taught it themselves at the dinner table by simply living around it. which means the gap you're about to see wasn't created by a locked door. It was created by two completely different homerooms running in parallel, one at school and one at home, and only one of them was open to everybody. Now here's where it gets interesting, because you'd think the fix is obvious. Just add a personal finance class. Several places have actually tried this. Some regions now require students to pass a personal finance course before they graduate. And yet, researchers who studied these programs keep finding the same disappointing pattern. Students pass the test and then go on to make the exact same money mistakes as students who never took the class at all. Same overspending. Same credit card debt. Same paralysis when it's time to negotiate a salary. What's going on? Here's the uncomfortable answer. Money isn't actually a math subject. It behaves like one on a worksheet, but in real life, it's an emotional subject wearing a math costume. Think about the last bad money decision you made. Was it because you couldn't do the arithmetic? Almost certainly not. It was probably fear of missing out, or wanting to feel successful in front of someone, or panic during an emergency, or simple exhaustion after a long week making you say, "I'll deal with the budget later." A worksheet can teach you what compound interest is. It cannot teach you what it feels like to stare at a shrinking bank account at 11 p.m. and decide whether to order food anyway because you're too tired to cook. That gap between knowing and feeling is exactly why classroom-only financial education keeps underperforming. You can memorize the formula for interest and still lose to your own emotions the very next time you're standing in a checkout line holding something you don't need. The takeaway here is worth sitting with. If you want to actually change your money behavior, information alone won't do it. You have to practice the decision under real pressure, not just study it under fluorescent lights. Let's follow the money a step further, because a knowledge gap this large and this convenient rarely stays empty. Something usually moves in to fill it. Picture someone we'll call Priya. She's 24. She gets her first credit card, and the little box at the bottom of her statement says minimum payment due. It feels responsible to pay it. It feels like she's handling her adult life correctly. Nobody ever explained to her that the minimum payment is almost engineered to keep a balance alive for years, quietly collecting interest on interest month after month while she feels like she's doing everything right. This is the flip side of the compounding you may already know about from growing your savings. Run compounding in the other direction, against the debt instead of an investment, and it becomes one of the most reliable profit engines in modern finance. A $500 balance, paid at the minimum, can quietly cost someone thousands of dollars in interest over several years, and most people never do that math until it's already happened to them. Nobody needs to conspire for this to work. Nobody needs a secret meeting. It only requires one simple condition, that the average person never learned how compounding works against them the way they learned it works for them. An entire very profitable part of the economy depends on that specific blind spot staying exactly where it is. This isn't a call to distrust every bank or lender. Most of them are just running a legal business model. It's a call to notice the incentive. The people selling you debt have every reason to keep it simple and comfortable sounding. The practical move is this. Before you ever accept a loan or a credit line, ask what the total cost looks like if you only pay the minimum, not just what the monthly payment feels like today. So if school isn't where money gets taught, where does it get taught? For a specific slice of the population, it never stopped being taught. It just moves somewhere school can't follow you, home. In households where the parents own a business, invest, or manage property, children absorb money almost by accident. They hear a parent talk about negotiating the price. They watch someone review a contract before signing it. They're in the room when a business decision gets made at the kitchen table, even if nobody ever sits them down for a formal lesson. Researchers sometimes call this the hidden curriculum. The things you learn simply by being exposed to an environment, not by anyone deliberately teaching you. Compare that to a home where money is treated like a taboo subject, something you don't discuss in front of the kids, something tied to stress and arguments behind closed doors. That child grows up just as intelligent, works just as hard, and still walks into adulthood with a completely different starting map. Not because one child is smarter. Because one child had years of quiet, informal exposure that school was never designed to provide, and the other didn't. If you've ever wondered why two people with the same degree, the same job, and the same salary end up in wildly different financial positions 10 years later, this is very often the real answer hiding underneath it. The practical takeaway: if silence around money was the environment you grew up in, the fix isn't shame. It's simply starting a conversation now, out loud with the people around you, especially any kids in your life. Here's something that trips people up constantly. Intelligence has almost nothing to do with this. You can meet a doctor drowning in credit card debt and a warehouse worker with a growing investment account, and it has very little to do with who's smarter. Childhood exposure to money doesn't just hand you information. It quietly installs beliefs long before you're old enough to question them. A kid who grew up hearing, "We can't afford that," every single week can grow into an adult who feels a flash of guilt spending money even when they can easily afford it. A kid who watched a parent lose a business can grow into an adult who avoids investing entirely, not because they did the math and decided it was risky, but because their body remembers the fear before their brain even gets involved. None of this shows up on a report card. It shows up decades later in a grown adult who logs into their banking app and feels their stomach tighten before a single number even loads. That reaction isn't laziness, and it isn't stupidity. It's an old learned emotional response firing on schedule, doing exactly what it was trained to do. The practical move here is small but powerful. The next time you make an impulsive money decision, good or bad, pause and ask what you were actually feeling right before you made it. Not what you were thinking, what you were feeling. That single habit, done consistently, tends to reveal more about your finances than any spreadsheet ever will. So, where does that lead the graduate we open with, standing on that stage, diploma in hand, about to sign her first lease with no idea what she's actually agreeing to? Here's the genuinely good news buried in all of this. The world that built that school system, one where information was scarce and controlled by a few, doesn't fully exist anymore. For the first time in history, almost anyone with a phone can learn what compounding actually does, how a loan is structured, or how an investment account works, often for free in an afternoon. The gap we've spent this entire film explaining is no longer a locked door. It's closer to an open door that most people simply never knew was there, because nobody ever told them to look for it. The catch is that the same openness that gives you access also gives you noise, half-true advice, and people selling confidence instead of substance. So the skill isn't just go learn about money anymore. It's learning who to trust, cross-checking advice instead of swallowing it whole, and treating your own financial education the way you treat any other serious skill. A little bit, consistently, over years, not a single weekend binge. If you take one thing from this entire film, let it be this. School gave you the tools to become an excellent employee, and there is nothing wrong with that. But nobody is coming to give you the second half of that education. It was never on the syllabus, not because you weren't worth teaching, but because that was simply never what the syllabus was for. The day you understand that is the day the responsibility and the opportunity quietly transfers into your own hands. That diploma on stage was never the finish line. It was the last day of one classroom and the first day of a very different one, the one where you're both the student and the teacher, and the tuition is simply paying attention.